The grand halls of power have always been built on a fragile balance of trust and secrecy. Within the walls of a presidential office, trust is the lifeline, the invisible thread that ties every guard, every aide, and every advisor together. But what happens when that trust is broken? What happens when betrayal lurks not in the shadows, but right under the nose of the nation's leader? This story begins in the heart of an African capital, inside the very office where the president carried out his daily duties, unaware that a silent predator had already infiltrated his most trusted circle. The president was a man of immense authority, but also someone deeply connected to his people. He believed in walking among them, listening to their struggles and bringing their voices into the corridors of power. His office was supposed to be a place of strategy and vision, where the dreams of the people were turned into action. Yet, as history has shown, every leader attracts not only allies but also enemies, some from the outside, and some, far more dangerous, from within. For months, the president had felt something strange in the air. Documents were slipping into the wrong hands. Negotiations that were meant to be secret were somehow being leaked. Rivals seemed to anticipate his every move. At first, he thought it was coincidence, perhaps even a mistake by his team. But when private conversations began appearing in the headlines, he knew this was no ordinary breach. Someone close, someone inside his circle, was feeding information to the enemy. The realization weighed heavily on him. This wasn't just about politics. This was about the safety of his nation, the security of millions of people who trusted him to protect them. If the spy was not caught, chaos could unfold. But who could it be? His guards, his advisors, perhaps even one of the clerks who handled his papers. The uncertainty gnawed at him every night. Instead of announcing his suspicion, the president chose silence. He knew that confronting the issue head-on would only alert the traitor. The key was patience. He had to wait, to watch, and to let the spy believe their cover was still intact. In those days, the palace became a theater of subtle observation. Every movement was noted, every word was weighed. And in that silence, the president's plan began to take shape. The first step was to tighten the circle. Only a handful of people had access to the most sensitive documents. Each one was a long-time associate, someone who had served loyally, or so he thought. The president began to set traps, inserting small, deliberate pieces of false information into different channels. If those details appeared outside, he would know exactly who leaked them. It was a dangerous game of cat and mouse, but one that had to be played with precision. Weeks passed, and the president maintained his calm public appearance. To the outside world, he was the same leader, confident, composed, and focused on the nation's progress. But behind the polished speeches and diplomatic handshakes, a silent war was raging. He studied the reports, watching for the slightest crack. Then one day the confirmation came. A piece of false information, planted only in one assistant's documents, surfaced in the hands of a foreign journalist. That was the moment the president knew. The spy was real, and the spy was close. The betrayal cut deep. This wasn't just a faceless enemy. This was someone who had shared meals in the same dining hall, who had smiled respectfully every morning, who had sworn loyalty to the flag and the office. To think that such a person could look him in the eye while secretly plotting his downfall was almost unbearable. Yet, the president did not let emotion cloud his judgment. If anything, the betrayal strengthened his resolve. Now, it wasn't just about catching the spy. It was about sending a message to the entire nation that treachery, no matter how hidden, would not go unpunished. The stage for exposure was set not in a secret chamber but in the full light of day. The president understood the power of symbolism. If the spy was confronted in private, the damage might be contained, but the lesson would be lost. But if the exposure happened publicly, in front of ministers, guards, and representatives of the people, it would echo across the nation like a thunderclap. The people needed to see that their leader was strong, that betrayal could not survive in silence. He scheduled a routine meeting, one that would gather his top officials and closest aides. It appeared to be a discussion about upcoming reforms, but in reality, it was a carefully crafted trap. Security was tightened discreetly. Guards were instructed to remain vigilant, though they were not told why. Only the president and a handful of confidants knew what was about to unfold. As the day of the meeting arrived, tension filled the palace like an invisible fog. The president entered the chamber with his usual grace, his eyes calm but sharp, scanning the room with quiet intensity. Around him sat men and women of influence, their faces lit by expectation. Among them was the spy, still confident, still hidden, believing their secret was safe. The meeting began with ordinary discussions. Numbers, policies, plans. But gradually the president steered the conversation toward the very subject of betrayal. His voice, steady and deliberate, carried across the hall. Trust is the foundation of this office. Without it, no nation can stand. And yet, when trust is broken, the entire country trembles. A silence followed, thick and heavy. Eyes shifted nervously. The president paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then he leaned forward, his gaze fixed, and added, "Today, we end the silence. Today, the betrayer among us will be revealed." Gasps echoed around the table. Ministers glanced at one another, whispers rippling like a sudden storm. The spy sat frozen, unsure whether the president's words were a bluff or a revelation. The tension was unbearable, and in that silence, the walls of power themselves seemed to hold their breath. What happened next would shock the entire nation. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Men and women shifted in their seats, their eyes darting from one face to another as if the truth might suddenly appear written on someone's forehead. The president, however, remained calm. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply allowed the weight of his words to do the work. That silence, heavy and deliberate, was more powerful than 100 speeches. Finally, he gestured to one of his guards, a tall man with sharp eyes who carried a sealed envelope. Slowly, the guard stepped forward and placed the envelope on the table before the president. The rustling of papers echoed like thunder in the quiet hall. The president's hand hovered over the envelope for a moment before opening it, revealing the evidence that would shatter the illusion of loyalty in the room. "This office is sacred," he began, his voice low but filled with fire. "It is here that the future of our nation is shaped, where the hopes of our people are safeguarded. But someone among us thought they could sell our future for their own gain. Someone thought they could betray us all and remain hidden. But truth cannot stay buried forever." The spies shifted in their seat, trying to keep a calm face, but their eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. They glanced down at their notes, then back up at the president as if searching for a way out. But there was none. The trap had been sprung, and now there was no turning back. The president lifted a sheet from the folder, holding it up for all to see. "This document," he declared, "was given only to one person in this room. Yet within days it was found in the hands of those who would see our nation divided. That alone tells us what we need to know. But more than that, we have testimony, surveillance, and undeniable proof." Gasps filled the chamber. Ministers leaned forward, their faces pale with disbelief. The guards at the edges of the room straightened, their hands tightening on their weapons, ready for whatever might come. The spies swallowed hard, sweat beginning to bead at their temple. "You thought you could fool us," the president continued, his tone sharpening like a blade. "You thought your smile could hide your treachery, that your silence could shield your lies. But today, we end this charade." Then, with deliberate precision, he spoke the name. The room froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then whispers exploded like wildfire. Some gasped audibly, others turned in shock toward the accused. The spy, exposed at last, tried to muster a defense. "Mr. President, this is a mistake," they stammered, their voice trembling. "I would never." But the president cut him off with a raised hand. "Do not insult us with more lies. The nation deserves honesty, not excuses. We trusted you, I trusted you, and you chose betrayal." The guards stepped forward, surrounding the spy's chair. The accused man's composure crumbled. His eyes darted from one guard to another, from the president to the ministers, searching desperately for sympathy, for escape, for anything. But all he saw was cold truth reflected back at him. One minister, a long-time ally of the president, leaned forward and whispered, "I cannot believe it. All this time." Another simply shook her head, her eyes filled with anger. The betrayal wasn't just against the president. It was against all of them, against the very foundation they had sworn to protect. The president rose from his seat, his presence towering over the room. "This betrayal is not mine alone to bear," he said, his voice echoing off the walls. "It is a betrayal against every citizen who placed their trust in this office, every soldier who defends our borders, every farmer who tills the soil, every child who dreams of a brighter tomorrow. To betray the president is to betray the people."